okay to record it. Hi, welcome to this episode of Dyslexia Solutions. I have a very special guest I want to introduce you to. He is one of the dyslexia geniuses that I spoke of in my presentations in the past, how he tapped into the gift and calling on his life. And right now he is a program manager. He has been with the industry for 20 years and at a current global position for the last 9 years. His name is David Weber, and I'm going to show you him as soon as I share a little bit that when I was working on my practicum, he was helping to create online exercises that my students could work online with, how to teach vowel teams, how to teach consonant teams, digraphs. He worked really hard, tirelessly without charging me anything. He provided some very creative things with Rova Reader. He's going to talk a little bit about that. And unfortunately, I couldn't use that with my practicum because Ortongillingham model is very disciplined in how they want you to present and tutor your child for the collection of data purposes. But what he wants to share would be great for a summer program if schools want to tap in and reach out to him. But I want to bring to the stage right now, David Weber. Come on stage. Hi. Yeah, so David and I spoke last week. We got reconnected after it's been about 6 months before that. And I was so excited to just hear what he's doing today. And he reiterated what he experienced as a child. And he just had some real encouraging words for parents, how to help your children overcome their dyslexia and get the victory in this. So David, I'm going to hand you the microphone right now.
All right. Thanks, Marianne. Thanks for having me join you here. This is great. Yeah, so my background with reading and struggling with that was I had a really, by the time I was in second grade, I already knew that I was slipping behind. Even at that point, I knew that I wasn't able to even keep up with the reading. And basically, I went through the next 12 years till I graduated high school, where I literally didn't even read a single question on a test. I would just guess at the answers, and I couldn't read well enough to do my homework, my comprehension. Basically what would happen is I'd start looking at text and I would get really flustered and my mind would be zigzagging everywhere and my eyes would be moving everywhere. And I could just a lot of anxiety. And so I could never even really relax to even begin to comprehend the text. And at that time, so that was in, like, let's say the 70s and early 80s. In my school system, they really didn't taught, never even heard of the term dyslexia or really reading disability. And I didn't have any behavior problems. I was just a nice, quiet kid. And so nice, quiet kids just sort of get swept along. And unless you have a behavior problem, at least back then, you didn't get assigned special help and nobody really, you sort of fall through the cracks. So, but that is, is what it is. But Marianne and I were talking last week, and it made me think about where I am now in my life. I have a position as a program manager in a global company, and the skills that I use now are things that I had my entire life, which basically it's my interpersonal skills and my ability to get people to get along and feel comfortable and be a contributor in the group. And one of the things that I think, like, my advice or my suggestion for parents with kids who are struggling with reading is to realize that, even now I struggle with reading. I read to my kids 2 days or every single night. And I read, like, with my daughter, she's 10 years old. And we're right now we're reading the American Doll series, the Kittredge one. And I struggle through that. And that's at like a third grade reading level. And it's not that I can't sound out the words or pronounce the words. Obviously, it's all very easy, but it's just for me going from word to word, it's really difficult. And I was thinking that, it's interesting because my self-esteem was so destroyed from being in school and failing every single test. And I graduated high school, and even after that, didn't know what I could do. I literally thought I was stupid and had no skills. It was really hopeless. I mean, I was almost 30 before I started to get a glimmer of what I could do for a job. So that was really hard. And when I think about right now, I still struggle with reading, yet I have a 6-figure job doing these interpersonal skills as a program manager that I've had my entire life. And so I would say that if you have a child, whether it's a student or it's your own child that's struggling with reading, is, it's great to help them with the reading, but also find out what they're good at. I mean, all the things that find some way to help them understand that they have value, that they have skills, and begin to develop on those. I mean, growing up, I was the kid that I always coordinated all the neighborhood kids to play the football game. I coordinated all the neighborhood kids to go on our BMX bike rides. I coordinated all the neighborhood kids to do the lemonade stand. Like, that's what I always did. That's a program manager, right? Like,
very cool.
That's what I did as a kid. And now I'm getting paid, a nice salary doing it, and I still struggle with reading. And so I think that, and just taking a step back and looking at your kid and the child that you're working with, and just say, what do they like to do for fun? What do they do that really gives them enjoyment? And how does that tie into maybe something they could do as a career, or, down the road, just so that, and to make them aware of, yeah, you actually have these skills. I mean, I never thought of that as being a valuable skill. It never even crossed my mind. And when Marianne and I were talking last week, it really hit home to me. That's like, if I would have continued from the time I was in my 30s till now, letting the fact that I struggle with reading be the definitive gateway to my self-esteem, I'd still feel terrible, right? But I just I've been working on it on the side, and realizing I actually have other values, so in a pie graph, maybe my reading is 5% of my life, it's like I'm a lot of other things.
Yes.
But when you go through school, reading seems like it's 90% of it, right? And so you're just like, just constantly being beat down emotionally from it. So while it's important to work on reading, I think it's also maybe a little more important to help that child understand they have good things too, and help them learn what they are, because it's, they probably have skills.
Well, let me ask you, first I want to say that when I present and speak on dyslexia and the trait of genius, how to unlock the genius of our dyslexic child mind, I talk about the 4 areas where dyslexic people really thrive. And there's other areas where they are successful as well. But we talk about engineering, architecture, entrepreneurship, and then the theater and the arts. So that if kids want a career that requires a degree, there is support for them with with accommodations that are given in college. I don't think you and I even talked about degrees that you may have received, because you're just so brilliant. To me, it doesn't matter. But did you get a degree that was that springboarded you to some of this discovery?
Yeah. Okay. So I did. And that's sort of even a crazier story. So my college degree is the Bachelor's of Science in Ceramic Art with a minor in psychology, because I sort of just wandered over that way because I struggled with, the academic side of it. And the way that I got to where I am right now in my job is with the pottery. I started doing, after I graduated high school, I lived in Japan, or after I graduated college, I lived in Japan with a Japanese master potter. So sort of an apprenticeship up in the mountains of Gifu. It's this like in the northern or the southern part of the Nagano Alps. Anyways, it was a small rice village. He was a national treasure potter. So I lived with him and started doing more pottery. And long story short, I ended up teaching myself how to do the chemistry part of the pottery, which is the glazing, the paint on the outside. And I ended up working for a company called Kohler. They make sinks and toilets. You probably heard of them. And the key skill that I first started realizing I had was that I could go down to the production floor and talk to so I got a job in the engineering lab because I knew the chemistry, kind of as a technician, I guess. but I could go down to the production floor and talk to the production workers, and they could tell me what was wrong with the clay, and the glaze and the materials. And then I could take that information and go back up to the engineering lab and talk to the engineers and say, this is what they're saying the problem is, and basically converting kind of a narrative description of a problem into a chemical equation type of thing. So yeah, and so I began to realize that I'm this bridge person, and more from that point, that was about 15 or 20 years ago, I've just been developing that skill. And now I work in a field where we do digital ceramic printing, but I do the same thing with program management, with getting groups to work together and coordinate on projects. So
that is so amazing. We talk about when we're born, we're not born with a reading brain like we are to see and hear. That reading is a man-made thing. And so think before the Industrial Revolution, before we had the printing press, that put that standard of reading that eliminated 20% of our creatives, and all the brains, how God designed these creative brains to design and think. And I just love hearing how you tapped into your gift and your calling. At the same time, you followed your passion and your love, and how even traveling to living in another culture was part of the foundation. God knew all along where he was going to be sending you, and you were open, and how it was the transition to something else, and who knows where you're going to go after this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
One thing that was, let me know if I'm not letting you share something that's really passionate for you to share. But I do recall having that conversation, which is why I thought this is going to be a longer interview, because that's such an interesting story. But let's talk about the Rova Reader program in itself, because this is such a labor of love. You started for your own kids. Now your son's dyslexic, correct?
No, my kids are both good. They're
okay.
Yeah. My son, he's what I call a reluctant reader. So he can read but doesn't read. And so I started actually, I'll go back a little bit further. So the reading program that Marianne, that you just referenced. So after I left Japan and I moved back to the States, I set up a small pottery and started doing ceramic stuff for myself. And financially, that really wasn't going very well. So I started substitute teaching to make money on the side. And as soon as I started teaching, or within a couple of weeks, I started getting assigned one-on-one with kids with special needs, or that needed help, assistant with them. And I was sitting with this kid at a table, listening to him read, and I thought, this kid is me. He is exactly what and so that was 10 years after I graduated high school, and I'm sitting there listening to this kid read, struggling exactly like I am, being left behind in a sense, just like I was, but at least somebody was sitting with him. And I thought, why isn't this fixed or anything? And so I started thinking more about it, and I began basically, the metacognition, like thinking, why is it that I can't read? What do I struggle with? And so I just decided to it reminded me of this time of a moment in art school when we were studying Italian Renaissance art, and they were talking about painters. And one of the things that the Renaissance Italian art painters would do is they would design the composition of the image so that the viewer's eyes would move around the image in a certain way. So they would have different colors or the figures pointing in a certain way, but the point was to get the eyes to move correctly around the painting. And for that class, I had to write a paper. And so this was, what year was it? Mid-90s. So kind of just as the internet was coming on the scene. So I actually had to go to a book and look in a book. And I opened up this art encyclopedia and was looking at the text, and I realized my eyes aren't moving right. I don't know where to put my eyes. All I could see, it was just black and white text, regular standard text, and my eyes were just zigzagging all over the page. And it dawned on me, it was so obvious, blatantly obvious, like, wow, this regular standard text is really hard for me just to focus on each word. And I didn't do anything with it while I was in college. But when I was sitting with that kid, listening to him read, and I started thinking, why is it that I can't read? I remembered that moment studying for that art history paper. And I thought, what if I just change the way the text looks? Home that night, got on my laptop and just made a Word document and just started changing the spacing, changing the colors, changing so that each word stood out separately. So I made more space between the words, more between the lines, made the font bigger so I could see it easily, changed the color from black and white, changed the background, and just completely changed it so that it was easy to see, for me to go from word to word. And I couldn't believe it. Was like, wow, this totally helps me. I mean, it doesn't solve phonics problems. There's still words I encounter that I can't sound out, but I could at least sit and read a document, you know, a story or something like that. And so what I did is I thought, and so to test it, I started typing up stories and putting things in and moving, and I realized I should make a program to do this. And so I designed a computer program for Visual Basic that you could load a text document into it, and then you could select your preferences, and it would automatically format the document to your preferences. So and that was about 1999. And so I worked with some developers. We made this program. I went to teacher conferences and things like that. And so this was 1999. So there weren't iPads. People weren't reading on computer screens. And I basically ran into a wall with, you know, the reading teachers and everybody, because they would, you know, it would, you know, why would you want to read something on a computer screen? I want to smell it.
You were a trendsetter. You were before everybody, a pioneer.
Yeah. So it was frustrating. So I did that for about 3 or 4 years. I went to teacher conference after teacher conference, set up a table, set up a booth, had my laptop, showed them, and basically couldn't really get anywhere with it. But I knew it helped me. And one of the other things that it really helped me with was that when I look at a regular, or did when I was in school, and I would just look at a document, you know, something that's printed out in black and white text, just standard, I would instantly start tensing up. My anxiety would get high. My eyes would be zigzagging everywhere. I couldn't concentrate. But when I started using my program, one of the things that it did was it really empowered me. Like all of a sudden, this thing that made me fail, which was reading, I could just take that text and change the way it looks. Like I had control over it for the first time. And so I could when I would look at these documents that were modified to my preferences, I was relaxed. Like I didn't have that anxiety. And so I just figured out a way to help myself, you know, get past that one first step. Now my reading skills were still, you know, not very good at that point, but what I did is I actually started reading. And so for me, it was a starting point, because one thing that I realized from watching like my kids read is, like my daughter's a really proficient reader because she just constantly reads. She'll get stuck on a word and she'll just keep moving and flow through it and just go on to the next thing. Whereas when I would run into a word that I couldn't pronounce or something like that, I would just get flustered and stop. And so by having my reading program, because it was so much easier for me just to move through the text, I just started reading more. And so I started loading in stories like 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Around the World in 80 Days. I read all the classics and I loved it. It was so much fun. And so my reading just like completely took off. And in fact, at that point in time, I decided I should go into education and be a reading teacher. So I had to take the what's it called?
Rika?
Exam or something to become a reading teacher to get to the teaching school. And I actually scored a 98% on reading comprehension after reading, just from practicing reading for a couple of years. I couldn't believe it. And it's like, wow, this is so awesome. And so I got into the School of Education and started taking classes, and then it was really frustrating because everything they were teaching, I knew wouldn't work for me as a kid, because I ended up just stopping, because it was, the thing I was concerned about was that it was forcing me to memorize and say things that I knew wouldn't work, because it's like, I was that kid and they're telling me to do this certain type of teaching methodology that I know didn't work for me as a kid and it won't work now. And so I just got, my better route is to create the software or the program, and just, it's going to come from the outside in. It can't come from the school system out. So, so I was only in the school for, I can't remember if it was, I think it was like a year. Maybe I took a year's worth of classes, something like that. but anyways, I've been continually developing this project, this reading program, because I guess my main goal with it is just to make a fun reading experience. And so for the kid that is reluctant to read, like my son, who is a proficient reader but is reluctant to, or the dyslexic kid or the kid that struggles with reading, to have a fun, interactive reading environment that, rather than coming from an education point of view, mine is coming more from like a gaming point of view. So I come from the other way and try to meet in the middle somewhere, because I know that as a struggling student, there was nothing worse than walking through the hall with let's just say the dumbest math book, right? A senior in high school, and I have a basic math book that's, addition, subtraction, multiplication. I mean, the stigma behind that is just terrifying. So I thought, when I make this program, the one thing I wanted to do is to not stigmatize those kids, the kids that really need it for the reading enhancement, the dyslexic kids, or whatever you want to call that type of reader, because that's sort of, wide term. But I thought that if I can make it so that mainstream kids like it, and then when the dyslexic kids use it, then they won't feel bad for using it. Yet embedded in the program itself, I've got all the tools that I know that I need to enhance the way the text looks, to make it enjoyable. And there's features that I'm adding into it, that, like, one of the things that I struggle with is memorization. And so having it so you don't have to rely on your memory quite as much. So to me, it's a fun project. I mean, without a doubt, this project is like my life purpose. Like, what here on earth, it's to make this program, it's to get this out of my head. Because I guess for me, it's a gift. I have like the ability, like the metacognition, to recognize, oh, I'm stuck there because of that. And so now I'm just like trying to figure out how to build those tools into my program. And I have, really limited computer skills and stuff like that. So it's tricky. So I'm hoping to get partnered up with somebody that has really good skills. But it's so liberating for me to be involved in this and just to have this opportunity. And for a while, the past several years, it's easy to get discouraged when people don't understand what I'm working on. But for me, I see it more from, I just haven't developed the idea enough yet. When the idea is developed enough and when its time is right, then it'll all make sense. And so right now, as I'm going through it, it's the process. For me, it feels so good to be working on it and to like come up with a new idea. Like the idea I'm working on right now is putting it inside Oculus. So that's that virtual reality screen thing. Because one thing that I realize when I read is that I get so overstimulated, right? Like your peripheral vision and your central vision. So my peripheral vision is always picking stuff up. And so for the kid with ADHD, they're always seeing all this stuff moving around them and they can't concentrate. But when you get inside Oculus, it closes all that off. You're in this controlled world. And so you can access my program via the Google link inside Oculus, and you can actually use the website and everything I have in there now. Which is great. It's fabulous. And so along with working with just the website through Google, Oculus has this thing where you can code, your own world in there. So I'm working on that actually with my daughter. She likes coding, and so her and I do that. We're working on putting a version of my Rova Reader inside Oculus as well. So,
so is it Ocula or Oculus?
Oculus.
Okay.
How do you spell it? Oculus. That's
interesting. Only one C.
Yeah.
Okay, because you're such a trailblazer, first of all, in the technology world. And, I use music when I teach kids to read. And I was told you're a trailblazer. No one's doing it. And what you're doing, people need to know about. And I was just at an international dyslexia conference, and we had Dr. Marianne Wolf speaking and on the science of reading. And what she really addressed was we need to address all non-readers, whether they're dyslexic or not. And
Mhm.
what you're showing is that when the non-dyslexic kids grab something that's interesting to make reading fun, they're going to engage, and then the dyslexic people won't feel silly engaging in the same type of a program.
Yeah.
So I think it's genius. And
Mhm.
I wish you all the best with this. Do you want to share a little bit more about Oculus? Because I loved your story about covering your ears and getting your vision focused so your attention is. A lot of our dyslexic kids have ADD and ADHD.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And so I think that using Oculus or something like that, it's a tool that I think schools should really look into, or anybody with those sort of, the ADHD. But if you want, I could try to share my screen and
okay.
just show you the program itself.
I think that'd be fun for the audience who's viewing. And if they're listening to this on a podcast, they have to click the YouTube link so you could see this presentation.
Okay, and it might be a little bit delayed. It usually is as I'm moving.
Okay.
So sorry if it's a little bit choppy. Let's see if I can.
I think we have about 10 minutes, so feel free to share.
Okay. All right. So this is a picture of the website.
Good, I can see it nice and clear.
Okay. Yep. And so what I have here, I have some reading lessons that I made. Basically, what I wanted to create was kind of just a 4-week lesson that you could do with a student. So I'll just sort of take you into some of the stuff. So the first part, I just have a read along. So basically, when I designed this, I thought, I know that there's different types of attention spans. So there's some days when I was a kid when I didn't have the mental capacity to really read or anything, like my mind was moving everywhere. So on those sort of days, I have basically just these doodly videos where you can just sit and just watch a video and see the person writing the words, so you can get exposed to text.
Uh-huh.
So basically, in this particular case, the kid gets to sit and just listen and relax to a story. And so the idea is to always be exposing them to text. Another thing I made was that I call it Hover Reader. So like my son and my daughter, they're about middle school age, they all read on their phones, right? They have text. I thought, well, let's break text down into something that's closer to like a segment that they read on their phone. And the other thing I wanted to do is have it so that it was more visually enhancing, right? So,
Yes.
So as you scroll through, and this is again, more for the entry-level reader, where we're just really breaking it down and slowing it down. Let's just read one segment at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea behind having the text move like that is it re-stimulates your eyes. If you learn about the retina refresh rate, which is huge with video games. So every time you hover over it, it changes the color, changes movement. So your eyes refresh, your retinas do. And so what that does is just re-stimulate you back to the center point, the focus. So I thought, well, let's have a feature where we can have that. So that's another feature that I have in it.
Love it. Love it.
And then another feature is the actual app itself. So I have, I made this is the, this is the program itself where you can go in and load text, or actually I have text in it. And you can modify the way that the text looks. So right now I've got a whole bunch of stories in this thing. But basically what you can do is when you load it up, you can adjust, you can change the background color, the grayscale, everything. But then you can also change the screen is a little small or a little big for this, but you can change the color for the font too. And the reason that I do that is that, so you can see I can have it changed by every sentence or every word. So the idea when I read is it helps me when I can isolate each word a little bit easier at a time. And again, this won't help necessarily with phonics. It's not intended to. This is, strictly just to make the reading experience a little bit more relaxing. And that's what it does for me. It takes away that anxiety. And so that, or you can have, so it never changes, whatever you want. And then you can do the spacing. I think I'll have to move this. So you can move the sentences closer together or further apart.
On the left bar there.
Or you can have the words be closer together or further apart.
We call that padding.
Yeah.
Padding between words, padding between lines. Good.
Yeah. And you can change the size of the words. So that's that. Let me see if I can get back where I need to go. Okay, and then the last thing I have is, or the next thing, and all this you can use inside Oculus if you want through Google, you can access the website, is I have these stories where you actually go inside the game called Minecraft.
Welcome to Rova Reader. My name is Leighton, and today I'll read the first 4 or 5 chapters of Fishing Cousins inside of Minecraft.
So
this is the top main seasons of Minecraft.
Very fun. Oh, look, a math problem.
yeah.
How many squares?
I'm in the maze to read the story. Today, the story.
So then you just go through the maze and the kid can sit and listen. We actually have a feature too where you could actually go in and walk the avatar through the maze and read the story yourself. So that's another feature that we have here. And then this was the section that Marianne and I made together. So there's all sorts of phonics lessons in here that we put in, to cover each of the different topics. So you've got your words that you can scroll through. And then we've got the in there to go through the key words that you're working on. Let's see what else we put in here. And then we've got, the individual words. And again, like here, I like it so it changes like that. So it helps stimulate your eyes a little bit more. So when you go to each new word, so we've got the different sections. Basically, it's just to make it a little bit more stimulating. And then just for a little game, a little fun, we make, my daughter and son and I make video games. So you can just play, let's see what's going on here. Well, I'm not sure why this one isn't working, but anyways, you can play video games. There's little games that they can play, but
kids love being on video games, right? So why not select a day or 2 a week where the video games they play will be related to education, related to reading. I love this, David.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you left all that, the work we did together, it's up there to help other people. One of the things we talked about at the conference was we shouldn't all be so isolated, doing our own thing and trying to make, money on our own. No, we should all be collaborating, pulling our resources together and helping the kids learn to read, dyslexic, non-dyslexic, because 2/3 of our kids are not at proficient level, which is C-. So we're struggling all across the board in the United States.
Yeah.
So I love, I think I really hope this YouTube will get people inspired to reach out to you and look at Rova Reader on Oculus. That would be amazing, huh? Check your analytics and see how. But I'm gonna share this YouTube like crazy, and it's really my prayer that people tap into it and tap into your genius, and are able to encourage their own kids that they would be inspired by your story.
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. Yeah, I enjoy it. It's something, struggling through life because you feel bad because you can't read isn't fun. So, anyway.
And you said it was like in a pie chart, it was 5% of who you are, right?
Yeah.
And not to let that define the student.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Okay. Well, we're going to close. And any final words before we go?
No, just thank you so much, Marianne. This is great. I love talking with you. So anytime
you're welcome. And we'll talk again real soon.
Yeah, great.
Okay. And to our audience, thank you. And if what we have shared has inspired you, we are a nonprofit 501c3 organization. Go to my site, dyslexia-solutions.com. Consider making a donation. And then another thing is we're now on Amazon, as Amazon Smile. So you can select us as your nonprofit. And anytime you make a purchase on Amazon, they'll make a donation to our nonprofit. And we can continue to get these podcasts and YouTubes out to you. So again, Dr. Marianne Cintron, thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you, David, for being our very special guest today.
Thanks, Marianne.
Okay, bye-bye.